Hi, I'm Warren Cornelius and you're watching Breaking the Cycle on Open Studio. We'll help you make informed choices about the prevention, treatment and recovery of substance addiction by consulting experienced professionals and finding evidence-based solutions. Welcome. Today we'll be speaking about the treatment of adults and we have in studio with us Charles Davids, who's a clinical psychologist. Welcome, Charles.
It's a pleasure being here.
Great to having you, man. Charles, tell us a bit more about yourself and the work you do.
Sure. So, yes, you said I'm a psychologist, but I always say that's by training because I'm an activist first.
Yeah.
But at the moment, I'm the Deputy Director at the Center for Student Counseling and Development at Stellenbosch University. And I also head up the psychotherapeutic unit to deal with students in terms of mental health issues. Before that, I was at UWC for 13 years lecturing in the psychology department. Before that at the Trauma Center for Survivors of Violence and Torture, and before that at South African Police Services, and years experience in the NGO sector. So that's what I do.
Charles, we're really grateful to have you on the show today. So Charles, let's start off with like, let's say I'm a person in addiction, and how do I know that I have a problem? And and you know what signs are there? What can I say? What can I see that that will tell me that I've got a problem with addiction?
You know, as soon as one asks the question, "Do I have a problem?" We have a problem already, because I think, and for me, it's the kind of thing, and especially with addiction, as soon as you cannot do things without the substance and whatever it is, and I must say here, it's not only illegal drugs or alcohol. I'm also speaking about over-the-counter drugs. As soon as I cannot go without it, then it means I have a problem. Because you will hear a lot, and especially in Cape Town and the Cape Flats, people say, especially with alcohol, they drink every weekend, but they say, I'm not an alcoholic because I can go through the week without having it. But because you cannot go through one weekend and any social event without drinking, you have a problem, you know, and it's always, by the time we ask the question, we know we have a problem, because I don't believe that people say they don't know they have it. They do, but it's just very difficult to acknowledge it when they have it, actually. Yeah. But they do have a problem already.
Of course. So there's various stages of change in addictions, and the stage that I mentioned now with somebody who's thinking they might have a problem is probably the contemplative stage. But the people who are, we speak about people in denial, and that's pre-contemplative. Can you just walk us through the different stages of change?
Listen, I mean, you're speaking about the pre-contemplation. It's when, you know, I might have a problem, but I don't really have it, and whatever. So, and we get a lot of that. And even when people say to them, listen, you have a problem, they will still say, but I can stop whenever I want. Yeah. You know, so they know there's something, and stuff in the relationship is not going okay, but they don't want to make any changes in that. And then they start contemplating it and saying, okay, things are not okay, I need to do something about it. Yeah. But they don't do anything about it yet. Because, I mean, what is the kind of thing? And I think the next part is then saying, okay, now I have a problem, because then the help seeking starts. You know, so then it's, okay, now I genuinely have, and most of it, and people, you know, people speak about eating rock bottom. I never really know what that means, because I think, because it's so different for everybody, because there's something that happens and says, listen, I mean, even in rehab, when I see people in rehab, they always say, this is my 8th rehab, but this is the time that I will train it. You know, but I actually think they just had that.
Because my rock bottom could be different to yours.
Absolutely, and it's a different kind of thing. And then it's, okay, so now I go through that treatment kind of phase, and then it has to go to, okay, now I have to maintain the kind of sobriety. And sometimes I think that's actually the hardest part of it. It's not, because I think the treatment part, it becomes easier, because I always say, give us at most 2 weeks and anybody can be clean. Yeah. But it doesn't mean the problem is over, because now I have to maintain that sobriety. And therefore, after kind of the maintenance kind of phases that we're talking about, there's also that the relapse is a reality. And then we start that circle over again, because, and I know people get upset, yeah, but you've been clean for 2 months and now you're using again and whatever. And I mean, in the rehabs, people speak about revolving doors.
Yeah.
Because the people come in and they've been there before. But actually, it's actually just around the kind of thing that relapse is a reality, and we have to look at the aftercare kind of things about it, because we can see that as part of a phase in that cycle of changes.
Sean, what are the different treatment methods?
Listen, you have different kind of things. I mean, in around Cape Town, you will get people speak about the matrix kind of models, and there's different clinics. That's even through the city of Cape Town. There, people speak about CBT models, the cognitive behavior therapy models. People speak about motivational interviewing, the 12 steps model, and Minnesota model. You know, so there's various kinds of things. But if you really look at it, throughout all of them, the one thing is actually about behavior change.
Why is behavior change so important for somebody's treatment or recovery?
I mean, I'll speak about it. If you think about it, that if we're speaking about change and we're saying the innate human fear is the fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
So if I am used to the addictive behavior, the change in that means that I need to have a behavior where I don't use. And the amount of time and energy we spend in active addiction, what do I fill that time with? And therefore we speak about behavior change. But that behavior change is linked to different, if you look at CBT, the simple way to explain it really is whatever I think affects how I feel, and that feeling affects the behavior. So a trigger for relapse can be a thought, not necessarily a behavior.
Yeah.
It can be a feeling, not a behavior. But sometimes people find it easier, they struggle to change the thought because they say, how do I stop my brain from thinking about that? But we can start on the other part of the triangle and say, let's change the behavior, because that will lead to a different thought and a feeling as well. And that's why the behavior becomes so important.
It's really interesting how thoughts can influence feelings, and feelings your behavior, and your behaviors have consequences.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Sean, I just want to mention one thing. So that's called CBT. What is the full word? What is CBT?
Cognitive behavior therapy.
Cognitive behavioral therapy. Okay. And what are some examples, like a practical example of how a thought can influence behavior? Like,
I'm not even going to think about, but think about it. So if I'm in the addictive phase, for example, so a thought about I need to get a next fix, right? Now, that even has physiological thing, because somebody will salivate, and this is thing. So even if somebody has been clean for 2 years and...
Sean, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We're going to have to stop for an ad break. We'll be right back with Breaking the Cycle. Welcome back to Breaking the Cycle on Open Studio. We're chatting with Charles Davids, a clinical psychologist, about the treatment of addiction. Charles, we're chatting about cognitive behavioral therapy and how your thoughts influence your behaviors. Many people who's in recovery or seeking treatment often say that it's because of some traumatic event that happened in their lives that they took to substances. Let's tell me a bit more about trauma. What is trauma?
So trauma is really any event. An event happens, and I'm traumatized by that event. And that can be a hijacking, a breaking in, a rape, sexual assault, any crime-ridden kind of thing that has an impact on how we cope with it because of that event. Now and that can start from any kind of thing, but it's a lot of the time it's not the event actually that traumatizes people, it's a perception of it. Okay. So I get hijacked, it's not because I've been hijacked, but what is my thoughts about that? So the perception, so I might die here today. That is the thought, and then the body actually goes into this whole thing of preparing to die. And then and then later, but yeah, I'm still alive. So because it's the brain kicks into in terms of flight, fight, or fight response, or even the freeze moment, and then it doesn't, because it doesn't have a also in the brain is very jealous. Yeah. So what now it does, it's I need to get the full complete story, and therefore we have the symptoms of the trauma. So I don't eat, I don't sleep. I'm easily startled. If a door slams, I'm hyper vigilant. I keep on watching over my shoulder. And now imagine that with communities where you get, crime all the time, where the trauma almost becomes normalized. So therefore we find on the Cape Flats, so there's gun shootings in terms of gang violence. Children don't run away from it, they run to it to go see it. And that's because that trauma has become normalized with, but it doesn't mean it's actually normalizing the psyche. Because then we see they're acting out, they can't concentrate in school and whatever, and then we start diagnosing them with ADHD, but actually we're not treating the trauma. And therefore and what a lot of adult people do, if they go through a trauma, because any substances numb those kind of the kind of experiences and stuff that we have, and even the kind of things trauma that we feel within the body, the muscle tensions and all of those. If I use substance, I go in a relaxed mode, and it takes that away. So therefore, sometimes it's because of the trauma that people have.
Okay. Is there a way that we can, as a parent or a spouse of somebody who's experienced a traumatic event, can pick up that this person is suffering from maybe a post-traumatic stress disorder or something to that effect, and what can we do about it? Like, what treatment is available for that kind of...
Listen, the immediate thing is that, remember, it takes about 4 to 6 weeks for us to actually diagnose somebody with PTSD. Before that, it's a normal reaction because of the traumatic experience. And I mean, nowadays we diagnose it as acute stress. But it's also, I mean, we used to call it a trauma response in terms of what it is. So I always say, if the people we're close with, we know if behavior changes, and we're coming back to behavior. So if behavior changes, we know something is not okay. And then we have to get some help for that person. Now, at most of our police stations across Cape Town, we actually have trauma rooms where there's lay counselors doing some trauma work for people that went through traumatic experiences, and they will refer on to any other kind of things, whether it's psychologists, social workers that's been trained to do the much deeper work around it.
Tell me something, what are some of the effects of untreated trauma? For example, if somebody had a traumatic experience, what are the consequences thereof?
Well, we see it in addiction.
Yeah.
I mean, the consequence of it, because it's not treated, we go into that kind of space. But also, remember, if we trauma, because that sits in your kind of anxiety disorders, but it also means people will probably have depressive symptoms as well. And the consequences would be, so with, sometimes with children you feel that they don't perform at school, or they can't concentrate, etc. And as I'm saying, therefore we go to ADHD kind of things. In adults, it's if I cannot concentrate, then I can't do my work properly. And then I don't sleep, because of the recurrent dreams and the intrusive thoughts of the trauma. I then start doing substances to numb that, so that I can sleep better, so that I hopefully, the intrusive thoughts don't come, I forget about it for a little while. And then when you open your eyes, you're addicted to a substance that you try to numb a particular feeling or to get away from a particular trauma, but then you sit with the addiction problem after.
So we spoke a lot about like individual trauma, but there's certain types of trauma that's like the entire group of people can experience, and sometimes it can be terrorism, like a terrorist attack or something that an entire group of people experience. But like in a South African, maybe even a Cape Town context, and we were speaking about this during the break, and it's something I'm quite passionate about, is like intergenerational trauma. And that's a product of untreated trauma that's happened many, many years ago. And if we can go back as far back as slavery, and from the abolition of slavery to the DOP system, and how people were forcefully made addicted to a substance, and the aftermath of that, and up until the very recent history of the Group Areas Act in the 50s, and how people were displaced from the areas where they lived, and how traumatic that is. We often think about places like District 6, but there were many other places, Camps Bay, Constantia, Simonstown, and they were displaced onto the Cape Flats. And what are the after effects of that intergenerational trauma that you've come across?
I mean, listen, we see it in South Africa. I think the reason for the crime and violence that we see in our country is because of the intergenerational violence that hasn't been dealt with. And I know a lot of people at this point speaking about, yeah, but apartheid is gone and
Yeah,
the
yeah,
20
yeah.
years in a democracy must be over. My answer always is, if you look at the Jewish community, why is it that we still go through the whole thing of the Holocaust?
Yeah.
Now, I mean, it happened many years ago, but they still feel it intergenerationally, because I mean, there's many studies in terms of how we even bring that over to the generation, or even just when a fetus is in the womb,
Yeah.
how we bring that trauma feeling over to our children, and in the way we talk about it, the way we kind of have it, and we still see that today.
Yeah.
So it's still real, it's still alive, and I think it's part of why we struggle with the addiction problem. So if we don't sort out the psychological issues of the past, we can never move on. It's not about the material things, it's the psychological issues that we have to deal with.
And you spoke a lot about like the consequences, not only addiction, but the crime that we experience, the violence, and it's about that internalized oppression that we experience as a community, you know, as a community of people of color. But we ran out of time for this segment. We're gonna have to stop and go to a break. We'll be right back. Thanks. Welcome back. You're watching Breaking the Cycle on Open Studio. We're chatting to Charles Davids, a clinical psychologist, about the treatment of substance addiction. Charles, often people in addiction feel they have a problem. But the thing that's preventing them from seeking help is the fear that they might lose their job, and they're not sure what to do. Can somebody lose their job if they admit they have a problem?
In actual fact, not.
Okay.
Right? Because, I mean, the labor relations is quite clear on it. So if there's somebody going through difficulties and they acknowledge that and say it, then the company must first look at, can we assist this person before I can fire them?
Okay.
Right? So, so there's laws that covers one for that. The difficulty with the fear then becomes, and therefore it takes longer, and then they end up losing their job anyway, because then they get written warnings and whatever the case is. But they must actually acknowledge to whoever the HR practitioners is within the company to say, listen, I actually have a problem, because then the company has to prove, what is it that we have put in place to assist the person.
Yeah.
I mean, I've dealt with many companies around it where we assist the employees through that process, and I mean, they're all quite happy back at work, and they're doing okay. But obviously, we need to remember that then it also means that we genuinely have to do the changes in terms of behavior and using, because if the company can prove we've done all of these things, but that hasn't stopped yet, then it means they can fire after.
Okay.
So it's important that we actually acknowledge it and go for the help that we need to put in place. And many companies now have employee assistance programs in place that actually assist quite wonderfully with different kind of things.
I think to a large extent it's the stigma that hold people back from admitting that they're or seeking help in the first place, and when somebody's got a job, they're at the early stages of their kind of their addiction, and it's that stigma that's holding them back, that shame and that guilt of like, what are these people going to think of me, and will I lose my job, and the effects of that stigma on the broader community that person belongs to. So let's say a person feels they have a problem. What are the steps they should take, like to seek treatment or seek help?
Listen, there's different kind of ways. I mean, and people underestimate, because because firstly addiction needs to be seen as a health concern, a primary health concern issue, and not as a criminal thing.
Yeah.
And I think if we get past that, I think we will get further.
Let's talk more about that. Tell me more about why is it seen as a criminal behavior rather than
because we criminalize addiction, and we speak about the war on drugs, and we can see how in America it didn't work. All over the world it's not working. The only place where we genuinely saw a difference was in Portugal, where they actually said, listen, we're going to decriminalize addiction, and we're actually going to make sure that people get the necessary treatment. Now, I see addiction the same as diabetes, the same as a chronic illness that we have to treat.
Yeah.
And now, if that's the case, then it means I need to, where do I then go seek treatment? It's actually within those kind of fields. Now, in different communities, I always say the NGO in the community will know where.
Yeah.
If we're not sure, make contact with the NGO. Or your local GP, because the GP will actually know where to refer to. but also our day hospitals, because every day hospital has a psychiatric nurse there. And if we go through that system, they will make the necessary referrals. And that's obviously for people who don't have any kind of money or medical aid.
Resources, yeah.
If you have medical aid and things, then obviously you can go to a psychologist directly, or and if that psychologist can't treat it, they will make sure that you either, if you need inpatient treatment, the referral will happen, and even through governments, if inpatient treatment is necessary, people will send you for that treatment, whether it's at Stickland or whatever the case is. But again, people mustn't see it as a stigma, because that's where the problem is.
Yeah.
It's about, for me, so you will go to a GP if your back is sore, if you've got a cold, if you've got a flu. For me, it's the same kind of thing. Go seek the assistance because you have a health problem. Because only the first time you used was a choice. Now it's an addiction because of what happens in the brain in terms of that. So go to seek those kind of treatments in terms of it.
So obviously your treatment would depend on your severity of your disease, and screening would be the most effective way of identifying the severity of your. What is screening all about?
Screening is basically to look at, so for example, if I screen somebody and I get you, the person is not really a frequent user and whatever, and I say, early intervention is necessary. And early intervention will then just be that, listen, I give you information, I check in with you from time to time, and we put certain things in place. And say, because listen, young people is going to experiment, and we know that. So they're going to experiment, and then we take them, but they've never used again.
Yeah.
Then you get somebody that's actively using, and sometimes I can treat it within an outpatient treatment facility, where it is about, I come for sessions during the week, I attend some programs, even some NA or AA groups, and I'm necessarily okay, I get a sponsor, and I'm okay, and I can deal with it.
So this is like if we treat it for, or you're treating for moderate...
Precisely, if you treat for moderate use, but if you in severe use, sometimes you need inpatient treatment, because it's very difficult to stop on your own, and you have to be in a facility to do that, because sometimes you're going to need what we call replacement drugs.
Of course.
People speak about methadone for amphetamine use and whatever. So, and the withdrawal, and especially from heroin withdrawal, because it's sometimes so severe, it's better to be in a medical facility for those kind of things.
Sean, tell me something. What is the difference between inpatient and outpatient treatment facilities?
Inpatient treatment, I go into a facility and I stay there for a period of time, depending on the program that people run. Sometimes if you go into a private facility, you stay there for 2 weeks, and that's basically you clean. So then the treatment doesn't really start.
Basically like a detox.
As a detox kind of thing. Sometimes people stay 3 months or even a year in inpatient treatment. They go through a program, go to work and come back to the facility. So that's inpatient, you're in a facility. Outpatient treatment basically means I stay at home, I go to work every day still, but I get the treatment while I do that. I have some programs that I go through, support groups, see a counselor, and they treat it in that kind of way.
What are the cost implications for the difference for inpatient versus outpatient?
Obviously, inpatient more expensive. If it's a private facility, it can be anything from 28,000 to 40,000, and for 2-3 weeks. Outpatient treatment obviously is a cheaper option, because it basically means you don't have to pay for, because remember, if you're saying inpatient, you pay for the bed, for the food. For everybody coming in to see you, you have to pay all of those kind of fees. For outpatient treatment, you maybe pay the counselor or things that you see, or if it's in an NGO facility or one of the matrix clinics of the city, you don't pay for that treatment. You actually do it for free.
So it sounds like there's more benefits to outpatient in terms of the amount of people they can service than there is to inpatient, and also because of the financial constraints, it's more accessible. Outpatient will be more accessible to our communities.
Absolutely.
Charlotte, it's been such a pleasure chatting to you today, and thank you so much for joining us. I hope we're going to come back again next season. Look forward to it.
By all means, you let me know.
Please join us next week. We've run out of time this week. Next week we'll be chatting to Natasha, and we'll be chatting about being family support. Keep well. Bye-bye.